Good morning. Welcome back to day 3 of Biomolecules. I hope everyone's doing well this morning. It is particularly rainy, but hopefully that'll clear up. Guess we'll find out. So today's aim, how do cells use chemicals to maintain homeostasis? You might have seen this aim before, and you might be thinking of some things you need to annotate. And I've got 3 things that I want you guys to write down, okay? So first thing I want you to note in this aim is the word cells. Remember that cells are our building blocks of life. Okay, so cells are the building blocks of life. All right, in this case, when we hear the word chemicals, we're talking about biomolecules. And as a reminder, the 3 types of biomolecules that we've talked about so far are carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. Now I am going to leave a blank space right here because we're going to talk about a new type of biomolecule today that I want you guys to fill in when we're done. All right, and the third thing I want you to annotate on this aim is that lovely word I told you you'd see a lot. And remember that homeostasis means we're talking about a stable, maintaining a stable internal environment. All right. So today, at the end of this lesson, you should be able to answer this aim using our new biomolecule we're going to learn about. But first, you're due now. List 2 sources of good carbs and 2 sources of bad carbs. Go ahead and pause this video and answer that question. Remember that carbs are what give us energy, so keep that in mind. All right, so 2 sources of good carbs and 2 sources of bad carbs. Some good carbs you may, oh, that's a highlighter. Some good carbs you may have thought of are things like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, right? You could have thought of more, but those are just 3 examples of good carbs. But on the other hand, bad carbs, all of my favorite foods, okay? Ice cream, cookies, French fries, potato chips. Oh, guys, this is so hard. Candy, right? All of those are bad carbs, okay? So these are things that we need to steer clear of. Yes, they give us energy, but it's not the best food to be consuming. So aim to get energy from those good sources of carbs rather than your bad, okay? Next up, so let's dive into these notes. I told you guys that we were going to be learning about one new type of biomolecule today, and that is something called a nucleic acid. So what is a nucleic acid? Well, a nucleic acid is a long chain of nucleotide units, which is present in all living organisms making up DNA and RNA. Okay, so a nucleic acid is a long chain of nucleotide units, which is present in all living organisms, making up DNA and RNA. So you might have heard of DNA before, I hope you have, but I don't know if all of you remember what it stands for. So we're gonna go over what each of these abbreviations stand for. So whenever you think of or hear of DNA, that actually stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. And you might have noticed that I've capitalized the 3 letters that make it stand for DNA. And if you're incredibly perceptive, you might have noticed that that word ends in nucleic acid, which is what we're talking about here. Okay, so that's an easy way to remember that DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, is a type of nucleic acid. And I'm not going to talk too much about RNA because we'll get into that later in the upcoming units. But RNA stands for ribonucleic acid. So once again, I've capitalized the 3 letters that make it RNA. And once again, it ends in the phrase nucleic acid. So both DNA and RNA are nucleic acids. And you might be thinking, okay, cool, so nucleic acids, got it. But what is a nucleotide? Okay, well, a nucleotide is a molecule made up of 3 parts. It's made up of a sugar, a base, and a phosphate group. So nucleotides are kind of like the building blocks of nucleic acids, but in order to make nucleic acids, you have to have a sugar, a base, and a phosphate group. Those three things have to be there for it to be considered a nucleotide. So I'll draw you guys a picture of what that looks like. So when you see a nucleotide, it's going to look something like this. You're going to have what we call a pentose sugar. And when we say pentose, it just means it has 5 carbons. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's a sugar. And then attached to that sugar is going to be a nitrogenous base. And when we say nitrogenous, that just means it has nitrogen in it. Okay, so there's going to be a base there. We'll learn more about those bases later. And then attached to the other side is going to be a phosphate group. And of course, when we say phosphate group, that just means it has a phosphate in it. Okay, so this is your nucleotide unit. A pentose sugar, a nitrogenous base, and a phosphate group. Those are the 3 units you have to have in a nucleotide. Okay, and I just told you that nucleotides make up nucleic acids, and DNA is a type of nucleic acid. So in this picture, we have DNA. Remember, it's that spiraling ladder shape. And if you notice, if we zoom in on this picture, this is actually going to be a nucleotide. Okay, so each of these rungs on the ladder is actually going to be a nucleotide, a long chain of nucleotides that makes up living organisms. Same thing on the other side, okay? This is also going to be a nucleotide over here and right here, and they all connect to form that long chain of DNA. And we'll learn more about that later, but you guys do need to know that nucleic acids are made up of nucleotides, just like this one right here, okay? And when we have 3 nucleotides, they come together and code for a specific amino acid. And I feel like we've heard the word amino acid before. Okay, remember that amino acids are the building blocks for something. I can't seem to remember. It starts with a P. Okay, amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. So keep in mind that everything we talk about this year is going to connect. Okay, so amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. All right, I think that's all I need to talk about here. Oh, I do need to add. So there are other types of nucleotides, but one specific type of nucleotide is actually ATP. Okay, and ATP is used for energy, remember? But ATP is an example of a nucleotide. All right, and yes, that's it. Okay, so nucleic acids, nucleotides, amino acids, got it. Perfect. Moving on to the question I want to ask you is, where does the body get the amino acids it needs to build proteins from DNA? So I just told you that amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. But where do we get those amino acids from? So go ahead and pause this video, answer this question, and then we'll go over it. All right, so where does our body get the amino acids it needs? We get those amino acids from protein that we eat. So things like meat, beans, nuts, right? Any source of protein that you eat is going to contain amino acids. So once we break down that protein, our body is going to digest. Our body digests or breaks down proteins into amino acids. All right, and then once our body breaks down the protein into amino acids, our body is able to recycle those amino acids and build our own proteins. All right, so, oh, I lost my favor. Fingers crossed these notes are still here. There we go. Okay, so where does our body get the amino acids we need to build proteins from DNA? From stuff that we eat, okay? If you have any questions about this, I know that this is a lot of information. Ooh, my lights turned off. Please let me know because I know this is complicated, but we will be going over this more in the next few days. Part B, next thing I want you guys to do. This is actually horrible. Well, we're just gonna have to deal with a few minutes in the dark. Okay, part B, the next thing I want you guys to do is I've given you a chart of a summary of all of the biomolecules you need to know. So remember the 4 biomolecules we've talked about are now carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and now nucleic acids. And in this chart, I've given you guys the organic compounds. So what are we talking about? I've given you the building block. And when we say building block, we're talking about what is it made of? Or what is the biomolecule made of? All right, and I've also given you the function. And when we say the function, we're talking about what does that biomolecule do? It is super, super important that you know the information in this chart. You've got to know this stuff. You have to know the 4 biomolecules, you have to know what each of them are made of, and you have to know what each of them do. I'm not going to read over this. It's up to you to learn the information here. But what I want you guys to do right now is use this chart to answer the 2 questions that are on your exit ticket. They're also the same questions as the ones down here. So if you want to answer these 2 questions and then go and submit your answers on the exit ticket, that's fine, as long as you submit those answers. So once again, use this chart to answer these questions. You have to know the information in this chart. All right. Once again, if you have any questions, please let me know. Leave a comment on this video, send me a message on Remind. Let me know what questions you have. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day. I'll see you soon.